Good morning. We continue thinking about this Ark of the Covenant being set up outside the camp. And as Moses set it up, he made quite sure that in fact it was portable, because he realized that the people would have to move on from where they were, and it had to be taken down and reassembled in the new place wherever they actually stopped. Now, it is set up in a particular way. Sockets of silver and bronze were driven into the ground. And then into these sockets were put poles. And upon these poles, the whole framework of this particular structure was created. When later on it was taken down, quite simply, the poles were taken out from the sockets were removed, and then it would move on to the next place where the sockets are once again driven into the ground, and then the poles will be set in its place. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that when these poles were set up and each one was joined to another and a frame was created around it upon which the different tapestries could be hung, each pole had to stand in its own strength. Each one was there in its own strength, in its own socket. Now, we as Christians, we come before God, and we have a dependence upon one another. Because we come together and form a Christian community, we actually strengthen one another by our presence together. And that's why it's important that we should come together into communities, and why we should be present with each other in the church, because we literally strengthen one another by our presence with each other. But each of us, each individual, must quite simply stand in our own socket. We must know what our relationship with God is. That is what gives each of us our individual strength. Then we can be gathered together with other Christians, and then we can become a living temple for the Holy Spirit to actually fill. We must look at this tabernacle, and we can learn these things from it. That these poles stood in their sockets, but they stood strong in their own strength, because when they were there in their own strength, then they could be joined with the other poles, and all the different tapestries which are hung from these particular poles could be added to it, and the roof could be put above it. But each one stood strong individually before they could be of any real service to all the others. See, we can learn things from this. We can learn of our own relationship with God. We can learn the importance of creating a community of living and worshiping Christians. But each one knowing who they are, knowing that they're forgiven, knowing that they're a child of God, stands strong in their own faith. Anyway, this tabernacle, this Ark of the Covenant, was put in this holy of holy place. And the people recognized that this is where it was. They also recognized that this is where God was passing judgment from, with a great seat of mercy of gold, and the place where they believed God actually sat for judgment. Amazingly, when we think about the future of the church, we realize that Jesus is once again going to come back into this world, and he's going to rule in this world. And he is going to rule literally from the temple in Jerusalem. And in that temple, he will sit upon that mercy seat, and he will pass judgment from the mercy seat, which will be established there. See, this is a pattern that Moses had brought from the very presence of God. And this is a pattern for our future as well. God himself is showing Moses what he has to set up to be a symbol to the people of what is not only what Moses has seen in heaven, but also a symbol of the future which will one day exist, where Jesus, sitting on the throne of his father David, will in fact rule in this world. So this particular Holy of Holies was set up, and a great veil set in front of it, because people were told not to really look at it. They could see the poles that the ark was carried on coming out from either side of it, but this is where it was, and this is where they came to worship. Now, attached to this Holy of Holy place was another compartment. And this was, of course, the holy place. And in this place, which was once again a covered place, with once again poles set into the ground, and once again these great tapestries hung on it. There were two great places. One was the great menorah of God, which gave light in this place, reminding the priests who entered here that they depended upon all the light that came from God. The first thing that God did when he carried out creation was he said, "Let there be light." And this menorah is now showing out the light of God in this holy place. And on the other side of the holy place was a table on which was put fresh bread. And on this fresh bread reminded them once again that they depended upon their sustenance every day from what God was going to give them. Give us today our daily bread. So the light of God and the bread of God was put into the holy place to remind them of this. And we'll continue with this again tomorrow.